light within our hearts, light within our thoughts, light within our words. May one and all and everything, blessed and loved, ever be. Welcome. I am Sister Who. With me today on the show is my friend David Slater, who is a spiritual counselor and intuitive. And the topic we wanted to address today is measuring manifestation. I suppose the term is most commonly found within what you might call New Age circles of spiritual practice. I think it's actually something that you would find in some form, by whatever name, within virtually every spiritual belief system, spiritual or religious. The belief says reality should be this way. And the question is, does it really happen? Or does it not? Or does it never? The cynic would say it never happens. The optimist, of course, would say it always happens sometime. You just have to wait long enough. And to which I sometimes jokingly say, I'm not sure I'm going to live that long. But and yet, just when you want to say there is no manifestation, the most incredible things happen.
I agree with you on so much of that. It's funny because in the 70s, I remember the book that came out, Write Your Ticket with God. So
Write Your Ticket with God.
Yes.
Okay.
And it was
it's like giving God a speeding ticket or a summons or a subpoena or something.
Or making your list and your vision board. And that was...
And why do you think the transcendent, infinite, divine creator of the universe would respect a humanly transcribed list?
I also wonder if, in a sense, we do get what we ask for, to find out what we truly want. For instance,
sometimes.
To take the concept that, again, is getting popular these days, you pray for and manifest a Lexus. Great, you've got this Lexus. And
Lexus automobile.
Lexus automobile. And then the very next week you need a pickup truck. Your Lexus isn't going to do you.
Lexus doesn't have a tow hitch.
Yeah, exactly.
And you have to pull a trailer.
Yeah, and so it is.
So now I want a Lexus and a pickup truck, and a motorcycle, and a jet ski.
Yes.
And and after a while it's like, okay, so now you're paying a mechanic to maintain these vehicles because some of them don't get driven except once every 6 months.
Exactly, if that often. What's interesting too is what it is you wind up asking for. I remember being in one of these groups, and they wanted to know what everyone was wanting, so to speak, what they wanted to manifest. And when it came around to me, at the time, I was so wrapped up in the whole concept of wisdom, the story of Solomon, so to speak. And I said, well, wisdom. And they didn't know what to do with that. You want
spend
wisdom?
Can't
touch it. And that's the thing. For instance, let's say in manifestation you want wisdom, and you ask for wisdom that can't be measured. I would certainly hope to say I'm more wise than I was when I was 18.
Helen Keller who said the most beautiful things in life are those which cannot be measured by the hands but must be felt with the heart? Something like that?
Yes. And how do you measure any of those? And if those are the things you want, what kind of life are you going to have? Again, wonderful, because, for instance, the Lexus that's going to bring happiness, well, it doesn't. This is the thing that has been proven over and over and over again, is our people are finding that it's not external to us that we find the happiness.
If that were true, wealthy people would be the happiest people on earth.
Right.
I don't think anyone's going to build a case for that.
We learned it as a kid. That thing we asked for Christmas, I gotta have it. And 2 weeks later, it's like, it's just not doing it for me.
Well, or the morning of, the first time you take it out of the box, it breaks.
Right. And so what is it we want to manifest? Now, as far as manifestation, we all know that when we look at life more positive things happen. and positive.
Sometimes.
But the thing is here's my belief, is that all things are blessings. Now, here's...
Understanding them as blessings can be quite a challenge.
That's the fun thing. That's the absolutely delightful thing, is what have you learned more from in life? And you know, I've had this conversation, from your paychecks or your bills. And bills have taught us a lot of very wonderful, very helpful things in life. So are bills bad, or are they good? And are we truly going to go through life without bills?
Well, the first thing to recognize to me is that bad and good are very subjective terms, that neither which has a lot of permanence to it. If we're talking about measuring manifestation, though, I mean, the belief seems to be that somehow the creative ability originates with us. And on some levels, I would say there are times when I thought about something, believed in something, wished for something, worked towards something, whatever, and it manifested. And there are other times where I worked even harder for something else, and in essence, the universe said no. And it absolutely refused to manifest no matter what I did. And nobody has ever tried harder to manifest some of these things, but they absolutely refused to manifest. Which brings us back to our topic of saying, how do we measure the manifestation? Do we measure it as successful, as unsuccessful, as a deceptive ideology that should never have been trusted in the first place, as a tentative possibility, as something that works for some people very well and for some people not at all? How do we measure it so that we have any way of respecting each other's experience? You know, so that the person who manifests abundance is not looking down his or her nose at the person who's living in poverty, just saying, well, you just don't believe right. That's your problem. You just, you know, if you believed like me, you'd have abundance in your life.
And that's what piety has served through society repeatedly, is the people will strive for piousness so that they are separate from others, so they can develop a level. I'm pious or you're not, or I'm more pious.
Because they think it'll make them immune to problems.
There's the thought.
I invite your opinion, but I don't think there's anything that makes us immune to the problems and challenges of life.
And I would hope not. Again, the problems and challenges are what...
But sometimes they hurt.
Yes.
And it's appropriate that they hurt. But that goes absolutely contrary to all this glowing, manifest your perfect life ideology.
Rainbows and unicorns. It's all rainbows and unicorns.
Maybe in the picture it is, but in the actual living of life, there is something magical going on. Because
always.
Manifestation does sometimes happen in the most unlikely circumstances.
And what do we do with the thing where we strive for that one thing, but by going in that one direction, we get something that far exceeds even our imagination? Then what have we done? We wind up not at all with the thing we strove for, but we wound up with something better, if you will.
And the hope is that in that moment, we'll be able to see that it is better.
Yes.
In some cases, people are so distraught by the fact that it's different than what they envision that, you know, it's where the old saying comes, looking a gift horse in the mouth.
Right.
But at the same time, there are other situations where you need to look a gift horse in the mouth, because in amongst the magical manifestations of a thoroughbred will be somebody trying to pawn off a plow horse that couldn't win a race if all the other horses were stoned.
Going back to the concept of everything being a blessing. many people speak of how rough their childhood was. And these days, that's getting to be more of a standard than an exception. Who has a more challenging childhood, don't know.
As if it were a competition.
Exactly. But the thing is I'm finding some people who had some rather troubled childhoods that are becoming amazing people. Mm-hmm. And I don't believe they would have gotten there without the challenges they came across.
Which makes sense.
Uh-huh.
But the essential turning point or the essential ingredient, I think, is being willing to look that challenge in the eye and to, with anger or determination or stubbornness or whatever you want to call it,
mm-hmm.
With chip on your shoulder, whatever, the point is not how you feel, but that you step up to the plate and you apply 100% of everything you've got to transform that raw material.
Yes. There's
kind of like we were saying in another conversation. Tell somebody it's impossible, they'll find a way to do it.
Exactly. There's the old joke, there's a room half filled with horse manure. Mm-hmm. And the scientists want to study human behavior, so they put a little boy in there and for about a half an hour, and they come back and he's like, oh, I can't believe it's smelly and terrible, and so on. They log the results and they put the next little boy in there, and they come back a half an hour and there's horse poop flying all over the place, and they're like, whoa, what's going on? And he says, well, this much horse poop, there's got to be a pony somewhere. Mm-hmm. and even if it's not true, which perspective do you choose?
Well, the version of that I heard,
uh-huh.
They put the first boy in a room full of all the lavish, expensive, most wonderful toys you could imagine.
Uh-huh.
And they come back an hour later, and he's sitting in the middle of the room doing nothing. And they ask, what's the problem? And he says, well, I'm sure if I touch any one of them, I'll break it.
Yeah, exactly.
And he's got it all there. But the other boy, as you said, I know there's got to be a pony in there somewhere.
Absolutely.
The thing that they both have in common is that their experience is totally determined by how they respond to their environment.
Yes.
The thing that comes back to measuring manifestation
mm-hmm.
is the self-righteous, whoever they are, standing around the room saying, well, if you just believed,
uh-huh.
everything would be fine.
Uh-huh.
And, looking at the boy in the room with all the horse poop, saying, well, obviously your belief is not correct, or you'd have a horse by now. So you're obviously a failure at manifestation.
Right.
And looking at the other boy who has manifested perfectly,
uh-huh.
but isn't enjoying it.
Right.
And say, well, at least he's a success. How is that a success?
Exactly. One thing...
But it comes back to how we measure manifestation.
One thing that's helped me a lot recently is when things don't go what you would call positive,
mm-hmm.
I like to say, wow, this is happening in physical realm. Let me be surprised. For instance, the flat tire. This is an imperfect world, if you will.
Oh, when something totally wonderful happens that seems improbable.
No, inversely. The flat tire. You get a flat tire. That happens in physical realm.
Okay.
And I can go, oh man, life is terrible. And I instead go, I got a flat tire while driving a car here in let me be surprised. This is, it's...
Surprised by what? Surprised by the occurrence of the tire?
And I'm being facetious completely in that. Because flat tires happen. Rain falls. Yeah, and rain falls. Mm-hmm. And instead go, oh, let me be surprised that this happened. It's not surprising at all. Let's go through this and find out what's on the other side of it. We can get so torn apart by any one thing.
So when it does happen, instead of choosing to be cynical and say, Murphy's Law again,
yep.
to say, well, this is not what I expected. And I don't know whether it's good or bad.
Right. Let's see what the adventure contains.
So even just the mere act of suspending judgment.
Yes. Yeah, because so
Is it good or bad? I don't remember the whole thing, but you probably heard it at some point. The series of is it good or bad? The story, the way I was told the story, it was a Chinese farmer.
Oh yes, and his son.
And his son, and well, it's a series of like 15 different things that happen, but somewhere in the middle, his son gets in an accident and breaks his leg. And the neighbor says, how terrible. And the farmer says, who knows if it's good or bad. The next day, they're going around recruiting for the army, but they can't take his son off to war because he's got a broken leg.
Exactly.
You know, well, you think how good. Well, who's to say what's good or bad? And, you know, and it keeps going from one thing to another. But the only way to determine good or bad is to give it a context. But because the context is always changing, the determination of good or bad is always changing.
Yes. And again, changing the thing that measures it, which is always us. Let's go to the...
Well, and we have the ability, we frequently forget it, but we have the ability to measure both ways.
Oh, absolutely. One thing that I find is an incredible power that we get to experience is gratitude.
Okay.
And
but there is such a thing as inappropriate gratitude.
There is. But
or an inappropriate practice of gratitude.
There can be. There's a group that we're talking about that does this whole manifesting, this whole believe a certain way type of thing. But there is one thing that they do that I get really excited about, and they say, how does it get any better than this? And
how does it get any better than this?
So here's the concept.
Okay.
Going through your day, and something wonderful happens. And you say, how does it get any better than this? The concept that's being taught is that the universe says, oh, he wants to know how it gets any better than this. So he rolls up his sleeves, or she, or they, and
the divine, whatever.
The divine shows us how it can get better. Now you can say, this is what the universe does, yada, yada. But instead, what it's doing is changing your way of thinking. How does it get any better than this?
What is changing that for which you're looking?
Precisely.
Yeah, and I think there have been numerous studies, from what I've been told, in which the minute you, or even informally, the minute you think of looking for something, you start seeing it everywhere.
Right.
Not because it wasn't there before, but because you had no reason to notice it.
Right.
You know, but as soon as it's on your mind, suddenly you start seeing it everywhere you go.
And we experience it in our interactions with people. We've seen the person who is having a terrible day and making sure everyone is having that terrible day with them because they're white BMWs in the shop and they have to drive the red one. I mean, the red one. Geez. And then you turn around and you see the gentleman with only one leg hopping around as fast as they can, getting to the next blessing because they know the next blessing is there. And again, there's got to be
in the room.
Exactly.
There's gotta be a pony in here somewhere.
There's got to be one. And then it goes to me, what do I choose? And you were talking about the false gratitude or the
inappropriate gratitude. When I say that, I'm thinking of the aforementioned self-righteous people who will say to the person who is struggling, "You need to learn to be grateful for everything." Whatever happens to you, you need to say thank you. You know, so they get a flat tire, thank you. So they get robbed and mugged, thank you. So they get, you know, and I'm sure there'll be somebody out there who's so committed to this ideology that they'll say, no, really, it did make me feel better. I think there is an abusive lack of compassion in that. Saddling somebody with an ideology that does not allow them appropriate grief and mourning when loss and pain are experienced. You know, something that basically says if you want to be a spiritually evolved person, you have to deny the reality of your experience.
Right.
And I don't think you can run from the truth of your own experience and draw closer to anything good. But the question we're talking about today in measuring manifestation is not about running from the truth of your experience, not about engaging in inappropriate gratitude, thank you for robbing me or whatever, but to measure the manifestation. How big is it, and what can I do with it? Instead of immediately jumping to, is it good or bad?
Okay, that was
What are its capacities?
So the Lexus, does it have a trailer hitch?
To consider it as a resource.
Yes.
Maybe because it doesn't have a trailer hitch, maybe instead you'll start a private sedan taxi company.
Which,
driving people to formal dinners or things.
Exactly.
Because you're the one who owns the Lexus. Maybe they only own a Toyota or a Chevy or a Pontiac or something, but they want to arrive in style. And you say, well, I'll dress up in a tuxedo and be your driver, and we'll drive up and you'll climb out of the back of my Lexus.
Right.
And everybody will see that you arrived in this very beautiful, classy car. And that will allow them to walk into their party with a big smile on their face, feeling like they're someone special, because of course we know they are anyway, but
yes.
But it validates them as a person. But it's something you can do with the resource that focuses and measures by its capabilities instead of by its shortcomings.
Right.
So it's how you measure.
Right.
But how you measure isn't good or bad. But I would say it needs to be honest. Well, giving thanks for being robbed, to me, is not being honest.
Sure. To measure, another way of potentially of speaking it would be evaluate. What are its uses? How can it be applied? As opposed to, is it enough, not enough? Does it fit these parameters, these types of things? It's more of, what are all the possibilities I can apply this to? And
instead of wasting time on a white Lexus, I asked for a blue one.
Precisely. And and how many times do we do this? This relationship has this title to it, so it must be these things, which immediately leaves a huge gap for obligation and guilt.
Or unrealistic expectations too.
Yes. What if?
Now, what do you mean it can't go 100 miles an hour? It's a Lexus.
Yeah. Right.
Well, where is it legal to drive 100 miles an hour anymore?
Yeah.
So it's possible they put some sort of governor on the carburetor or on the fuel injection system so that when you get to a certain level, it simply will not accelerate beyond that point.
Yeah, but it'll be smooth.
It'll be smooth. It'll be, a well-engineered car, everything else, but you have no need to go 100 miles an hour. There's nowhere legal to do that. So consequently, and if you did go 100 miles an hour, Lord knows what trouble you'd get yourself into. So it may be a good thing, but it's still that question of how do we measure the manifestation in order to be empowered by it, instead of, out of self-righteousness or whatever, deciding is it good or bad, is it enough?
Right.
How much is enough anyway?
Has anyone ever achieved that? Well, I suppose we do every day. We have enough air to continue. There's that. The possibilities is what keeps on coming back up. Is what are the possibilities? And one thing I've noticed along these same lines of manifestation is I think I have a pretty good imagination. What I keep running into in my life is my imagination being exceeded. When it happens more than once, it doesn't make sense, because with the new experience, my imagination ought to grow to that, but I keep on experiencing things that exceed my imagination. And that's why I find it funny when somebody tells me to put down a list or a vision board or this or that. It's like, why would I want to limit myself in that?
But additionally, that's not to say that your life will always be that way.
Oh, sure.
It is for now, and that's wonderful. I wish I could wave a magic wand and make it that way for everyone. But if life is primarily about the growth of the soul, there may be, as St. John of the Cross said, a dark night of the soul where nothing makes sense, nothing is going right, and there's nothing you can do about it.
And so it is, yes.
And so it is. But if life is primarily about the growth of the soul, it's not so important what actually does or doesn't happen. I mean, the measurement of the manifestation really isn't all that important. Because what matters is not the manifestation, but what you learn from whatever does manifest.
So it's not the circumstances, but your reaction to them?
Your reaction to it, and also the way that is empowering. The ability to love and the wisdom that is present afterwards that wasn't present before.
Absolutely.
That, to me, should be the true measurement of manifestation. Not the size of the bank account, not the kind of car, not whether you're in the room full of toys or the room full of horse poop, but what you've learned.
Indeed.
And to all the self-righteous people gathering around the room looking down their noses, I will be most happy to slam the door in their faces.
And so it is.
Thank you.
You're more than welcome.